All right, we are about to go on an absolutely epic journey through one of the world's longest continuous civilizations. We're going to follow the incredible story of China from its very beginnings in myth and legend all the way to its rise as a modern global superpower. So let's just dive right in. So let's start with a number, 5,000. That's 5 millennia of civilization. Think about that for a second. It's an unbroken historical thread that connects the ancient world to our world, right now, in the 21st century. It's a scale of history that's honestly kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it is the absolute key to understanding China today. Now, to tackle a timeline this massive, we've broken it down into 6 key chapters. We're going to start with those foundational myths, then watch an empire get forged in fire. We'll explore these incredible cycles of innovation and invasion, see the dramatic collapse of the final dynasty, and then finally chart its wild path to becoming a modern superpower. Okay, so our story begins where so many great stories do, in the realm of myth, deep in the fertile valley of the Yellow River. This is where the political and philosophical DNA of China was first written, the ideas that would shape it for thousands of years to come. So, emerging from this cradle of civilization, we get the first major dynasties. You've got the Jia, supposedly founded by the legendary Yu the Great, a hero famous for taming the massive floods of the Yellow River. After them came the Shang, and this is a big deal, because they gave us the earliest known form of Chinese writing. And then you have the Zhou, who would go on to reign longer than any other dynasty in China's entire history. Now, what's so important about the Zhao is this one massive idea they introduced, something that would define Chinese politics for the next 3,000 years, the mandate of heaven. The concept was pretty revolutionary. It said, sure, heaven grants an emperor the right to rule, but, and this is the kicker, that right isn't permanent. If a ruler becomes corrupt, unjust, or just plain bad at their job, they lose the mandate. And when that happens, the people have the right to rebel. It was the ultimate cosmic justification for changing power. Well, that long reign of the Zhao couldn't last forever. Its slow decline plunged the entire land into centuries of chaos, a true trial by fire. And out of those flames, a unified Chinese empire would finally be born. This was the famous Warring States period. The Zhao dynasty completely splintered, and 7 major kingdoms basically rose from the ashes, all fighting for control. For almost 200 years, China was just one giant bloody battlefield. But here's the crazy part. This period of intense violence was also a time of unbelievable intellectual creativity. You had thinkers like Confucius and the military genius Sun Tzu all emerge from this chaos, and their ideas would go on to shape Chinese thought forever. After 2 centuries of constant war and division, the chaos finally came to an end. One state conquered all the others, and one leader would unite them all. And that leader was Qin Shi Huang, the very first emperor of the Qin dynasty. Now, his dynasty was incredibly short. It lasted only about 15 years, but wow, its impact was huge. He's the one who unified China, standardized everything from money to the writing system, and started work on what would eventually become the Great Wall. His rule was brutal, though, and it collapsed fast, but it paved the way for the much more stable Han dynasty. And the Han, they ruled for over 400 years. It was a genuine golden age that gave us the Silk Road, connecting China to the rest of the world, and saw an explosion of art and science that would define Chinese culture for centuries. You know, this pattern of collapse and rebirth would really define the next 1,000 years of Chinese history. It became this recurring cycle. You'd see these incredible golden ages of prosperity and invention, often followed by absolutely devastating invasions that would test the very resilience of the civilization. And there is no better example of a peak in that cycle than the Song dynasty. During this time, China was, and this is no exaggeration, the most advanced civilization on the planet. I mean, they were the first government in the world to issue paper money. They invented gunpowder, the magnetic compass for navigation, and movable type printing, centuries before Gutenberg ever did it in Europe. It was an absolute economic and technological powerhouse. At its height, the population under the Song reached around 120 million people. But a storm was brewing up on their northern border, a force that was about to change absolutely everything. That force, of course, was the Mongols. Their invasion was unbelievably swift and brutal. In just a couple of decades, China's population was literally cut in half, plummeting to a shocking 60 million. It was a demographic catastrophe on a scale that is just hard to imagine. So you really have to understand this contrast to get the impact.
The Mongols, led by Kublai Khan, set up the Yuan dynasty, and while they were a military superpower, they were seen as, well, culturally backward compared to the incredibly sophisticated Song civilization they just wiped out. For the very first time, all of China was ruled by foreign invaders, and that was a profound shock to the entire system. After about a century of Mongol rule, a native rebellion finally restored a Han Chinese dynasty to power. But this was really just setting the stage for the final dramatic act of imperial China and the end of a system that had lasted for over 2,000 years. So first, a rebellion led by a peasant drove the Mongols out and established the Ming dynasty. Now, the Ming were absolutely haunted by the memory of that invasion, so they poured immense resources into defense, completing and fortifying the Great Wall that we know today. But in the end, it wasn't enough. In 1644, Manchu invaders, a different group from the north, managed to breach the wall and establish the Qing, which would become China's very last imperial dynasty. The thing is, the Qing dynasty never really felt stable. It was constantly dealing with huge internal rebellions and, for the first time, facing intense pressure from a completely new direction, the sea. European powers like Britain were forcing trade, seizing control of key ports. The dynasty was weakening from the inside and the outside, and it all came to a head in a humiliating defeat when an alliance of 8 foreign nations marched right into Beijing. The entire imperial system was completely crumbling. But the collapse of that last dynasty in 1912 didn't bring peace. Not at all. Instead, it kicked off one of the most violent and transformative periods in all of China's history. The 20th century would see the nation totally and completely reinvented. The 20th century was just this relentless series of upheavals. The Republic of China was founded in 1912, but it really struggled to hold the huge country together. Then, in 1937, came a devastating invasion from Japan, which pulled the nation into World War II. And no sooner had that war ended than a bitter civil war erupted. This conflict ultimately led to the Communist Party's victory and the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949 under Mao Zedong. Mao's rule did finally bring stability, though often at a very high cost. After he died, his successor, Deng Xiaoping, launched a series of massive economic changes called reform and opening up. This just unleashed decades of absolutely explosive growth, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty and transforming China from a struggling nation back into a dominant global superpower. And that brings us right back to where we started. That number, 5,000 years, it isn't just some abstract figure. It's the story of a civilization's journey, from a tiny village on a river to sprawling dynasties, from a unified empire to a modern republic, through these incredible cycles of devastating conflict and breathtaking glory. Modern China is the product of every single one of those millennia. And when you look at this immense, complex, and often contradictory past, you're left with one big question. After a 5,000-year journey, what on earth will the next chapter hold?